meteorite crashed to the ground, and from the massive crater billowing with a sour, foul heat emerged a headless behemoth, walking on a few thick, bony stilts. It moved like an out-of-control demolition machine, completely ignoring our barrage of fire, and with its scythe-like legs, it effortlessly kicked a several-ton armored Humvee into the air as if it were a tin can. Before I could even react, I was sent tumbling along with the rolling vehicle before crashing heavily to the ground. The night vision goggles' lenses shattered into a spiderweb pattern. My right shoulder was dislocated, and I was pinned between the overturned Humvee's seat and door. The crumpled frame pressed inward, crushing my chest and making it hard to breathe. 15 meters away, the tires were still burning, the flickering orange-yellow flames casting alternating light and shadow across the sand. In that glow, I saw the thing in its entirety. It was lifting Harris with 3 of its legs. I'm not mistaken, 3 legs. The creature had no head, only a cluster of wet, gaping holes at the top of its torso, opening and closing toward Harris's face. Its lower body rotated a full circle, and as its upper half twisted, something inside its chest clicked several times, a dull, drum-like sound echoing from within its shell. Harris's hazmat suit was punctured. The sound of the air layer rupturing was like a pressure cooker's valve suddenly releasing. A sharp, hissing screech. I watched as the hooks on its legs dug into the suit, lifting Harris until his feet left the ground. The air was thick with the smell of burning rubber and a pungent, eye-stinging ammonia stench. Then the sounds began, like someone stepping on a bundle of dry bamboo beneath their feet. Every joint in Harris's body was pulled apart. The creature's movements weren't fast. It simply tugged each limb in a different direction. Harris suddenly went still, his body limp, hanging from those legs as his hazmat suit deflated. It flung Harris toward the burning Humvee. The body struck the chassis, bounced once, and slid into the flames. Suddenly, everything fell silent. Only the sound of hydraulic fluid dripping onto the scorching metal, hissing softly. My right arm was pinned beneath me, the pain now replaced by a dull, swelling sensation, as if someone were prying my arm out of its socket. The door still pressed against my chest, and with every breath, my ribs creaked against the metal. Our Anvil Company, 3rd Platoon, had been dropped into this desolate stretch by helicopter in the middle of the night. The orders were simple. 6 hours earlier, Space Force radar had locked onto this meteor shower. One of the fragments had decelerated unnaturally mid-air, gliding into the desert as if making a landing. Hoffman sat beside me, chewing gum, muttering that it was probably just another satellite debris from some country, dragging us out in the dead of night to clean up the mess. Thermal imaging from the first drones showed a crater still smoking. Something oval-shaped bulged in the center, half buried in the sand. When our convoy arrived, the sky was still pitch black. The headlights illuminated the creature's shell, a grayish-blue surface, pieced together in sections like a crab's carapace. Along the edges were raised bumps, resembling dried tendons. A half-meter thick lid had been kicked open from the inside, flung over a dozen meters away, snapping a shrub clean off at the base. The inside of the lid was covered in barbs, dense, bone-white spikes that gleamed under flashlight beams. I stood at the hatch and peered inside. The flashlight swept across the interior walls, revealing a sticky, transparent fluid oozing down the shell, carrying tiny white particles the size of sand grains. The sergeant major nudged the inner wall with his rifle barrel, and the mucus instantly turned white, hardening into a scab-like layer, all in the blink of an eye. At the bottom of the chamber were 3 deep footprints, each stride nearly 3 meters long. Suddenly, the radio crackled, emitting a low, buzzing hum that vibrated deep in my ears. The rhythm of the sound synced perfectly with my heartbeat. Thump, thump. The platoon leader split us into 2 search teams. The military dog, Rex, was brought forward but stopped at the edge of the drag marks, lying down and emitting a low, almost inaudible whine from its throat. The handler quickly led it back to the vehicle. My team followed the drag marks down a dry riverbed. Through the night vision goggles, the mucus trails on the sand formed star-like patterns, spreading out in clusters that grew denser the further we went. At a bend in the riverbed, we came across a dead donkey. We came across a dead donkey. There wasn't a single visible wound on its body, yet it lay unnaturally flattened on the sand, as if crushed by a hydraulic press out of nowhere. Marquez crouched down to take a look and said, "This wasn't for food." As soon as he finished speaking, a high-temperature mass suddenly flashed onto the edge of the thermal imager screen. Its temperature was absurdly high, white in color, but with a blurry, indistinct outline. The shadow writhed, its shape constantly shifting, and then it vanished in an instant, leaving only a lingering thermal trail on the screen. Next, a sound came through the directional microphone, rising from beneath the ground. Asterisk thump, asterisk once, asterisk thump, asterisk a second time. Slow, like a heartbeat, but far heavier, pushing upward through the soil, palpable through the soles of our feet. Small stones on the sand began to tremble slightly. Marquez looked at me and I looked at him. Neither of us spoke. The thing burst out from behind our heels. The sand erupted, a column of it spraying up twice the height of a man. I saw four legs first, all joints bent outward in reverse, utterly unlike any earth creature. Beneath the legs were thick, stubby bone-like structures, landing like hooves, but with curved hooks extending and retracting along their edges. Then the torso rose from the sand. No head, just a thick, sturdy body, covered in a gray-blue shell riddled with holes, densely packed, exhaling hot air with each breath. The hot air exploded into a blinding white haze in the night vision goggles. We opened fire. My muzzle aimed at the largest plate of armor on its chest, and I pulled the trigger all the way. The sound of the bullets hitting was off. Asterisk clang, clang, clang asterisk, like hammering on ceramic tiles, sharp and brittle. The bullets deformed, tumbling into the air. With each hit, a yellowish, sticky fluid oozed from the armor, trapping the bullets as they spun. The fluid thickened instantly, encasing the bullets until they stopped spinning, then slowly squeezed them out, dropping them onto the sand with a ting. Hoffman cursed from the vehicle-mounted machine gun. "What the hell is this thing?" The M2 roared to life, the noise so intense it made my chest numb. The .50 caliber rounds finally left faint white marks on the armor, but the sticky fluid oozed faster, encasing the bullets and thickening with each impact. The thing just stood there, bullets clattering off its body, the holes in its shell opening and closing. The platoon leader called for grenades. Marquez raised the M320, aimed near its right foreleg, and fired with a thump. The grenade exploded mid-air, spraying dozens of shrapnel fragments in a fan-shaped arc, all embedding into its side, piercing deep into the gaps of its armor and soft flesh. It made a sound, low whoosh, like steam escaping from a massive boiler. Then it shook its body, the shrapnel popping out as its muscles contracted, falling onto the sand and smoking. Then it moved. One of its legs lashed out, fast as a whip. The bone scythe at the tip didn't slice through Harris's ballistic plate, but the force transmitted through it. I heard a crack, muffled, like stepping on a wet branch. Harris's chest plate dented inward. He was struck again. Same spot, harder. Asterisk crack, crack, crack asterisk in rapid succession. His collarbone snapped, followed by a row of ribs, the sound muffled within his flesh. Harris let out a gurgle, air forcing its way from his throat. His breathing tube tore loose from his mask, flinging into the sand. He collapsed. The thing didn't pursue him. It turned its body toward Hoffman's machine gun vehicle. Hoffman was still firing, his curses now indistinguishable, reduced to guttural noises. Bullets rained against its shell as it advanced, pushing through the hail of fire, its steps slow but steady, like a bulldozer. Marquez reloaded, shouting something, but my ears were ringing from the gunfire, and I couldn't hear. I changed positions, crouching behind a dirt ridge, rifle but pressed against my shoulder as I kept firing. One of my bullets grazed its leg joint, where two plates of armor met. Dark fluid gushed out, steaming hot, and its leg faltered for a moment. "Aim for the gaps, the armor gaps," I yelled, but it was too late. It charged to the side of the machine gun vehicle, raised one leg, and smashed the bone-like structure onto the M2's receiver. The sound was like a hammer striking sheet metal, a loud clang, as the feed cover flew off into the distance. The barrel bent, tilting upward at an angle. The M2 fell silent. Hoffman rolled off the gun mount, his hand fumbling for his sidearm. Before he could draw it, another leg swept him sideways, throwing him 3 meters away. He landed on his back. A piece of his ballistic plate shattered. Hoffman tried to push himself up twice but couldn't. Our firepower was drastically reduced. The remaining rifle bullets hitting it were like throwing pebbles. The sticky fluid thickened further, stopping the bullets long before they could even reach the armor, trapping them in the viscous layer. Grenade! The platoon leader pulled the pin on one himself and hurled it. 3 seconds later, it exploded. In the flash of light, the thing staggered, the slime on its carapace vaporizing into a cloud of white steam that carried a sharp, acidic smell. The shell didn't crack, not even a scratch. It shook itself off and kept turning toward us. I emptied my 3rd magazine. My fingers trembled as I fumbled for the 4th, jamming it twice before it finally clicked into place. Marquez kept firing beside me, round after round aimed at the seams in its armor. A few rounds hit, sending up puffs of steam from its body, but the wounds were quickly sealed over by oozing mucus. The thing started picking targets. It paused, its maw gaping as it exhaled hot air, the barbs on its appendages twitching nervously. It was sizing up its prey. Then it retreated. Its 4 legs shifted through the sand, step by step, backing into the darkness. The holes on its body slowly closed, the steam thinning out. Everyone froze where they stood, afraid to pursue, afraid to make a sound. We just crouched behind cover, rifles raised, watching its shell gradually fade into the green glow of our night vision goggles. A long trail of prints marked the sand where it had passed. In its wake, mucus had smeared into broken lines, emitting faint wisps of white smoke. We carried Harris back to the Humvee position. He was still breathing, eyes open, lips trembling uncontrollably, unable to speak. When the medic cut open his hazmat suit, his chest was a mass of dark bruises. A misshapen bulge protruded near his left collarbone, the bone visibly pressing against the skin. The medic touched it gently, and Harris let out a strained hiss from his throat. As they stabilized him, he was in shock, but his eyes still tracked movement. The medic said he'd make it. The platoon leader radioed command, target wounded and retreating, heading back toward the crash site. He called in coordinates and requested an airstrike. I crouched beside the Humvee's wheel well to reload, my fingers still shaking. It took several tries to slot the magazine in properly. Marquez sat next to me, breathing heavily, the filter on his gas mask caked with sand. Then I noticed something. Everything had gone quiet. The desert insects, the drawn-out chirping of crickets, gone. Even the sound of wind brushing over sand had vanished. The silence was so deep, all I could hear was the thumping of my own pulse in my ears. Marquez stood up, scanning the mucus trail with his thermal imager. The heat signature from the thing's path was fading, shifting from yellow to orange to a dull red. He knelt and prodded the mucus on the sand with his bayonet tip. It had hardened into a transparent shell, like amber, encasing bullet fragments, shrapnel, sand, and pebbles. "It's sealing its wounds," Marquez said. He pried up the hardened shell and flipped it over. The underside was still sticky, stretching into fine threads. "It's expelling foreign objects." Marquez lifted the shell. "It's ejecting and sealing off all the bullets and shrapnel that hit it, like applying its own tourniquet." The platoon leader repeated the coordinates over the radio, reporting the target was stationary and recommending attack aircraft. Static crackled from the other end, but no response came. I leaned against the wheel and sat for a moment. My mouth tasted bitter, and the air filtered through my gas mask carried a rubbery scent. Hoffman limped over from the machine gun truck, a crack running across the backplate of his body armor. He sat down cursing, saying the thing had thrown him and his gun clear, and his back was probably twisted. Marquez had him lie down, lifted his backplate, and examined it. No broken bones, just a large red welt. The silence persisted. Then I felt something through the soles of my boots. That thump vibration I'd heard earlier. But it wasn't distant anymore. It was right beneath us, slow, rhythmic, making the surface of the sand tremble faintly with each beat. Hoffman stopped cursing and looked down at his feet. The sand in front of his boot tips began to shift unnaturally. Marquez slowly rose to his feet, still clutching the amber-like shell. He glanced down, then up at me. I saw his mouth open as if to say something. Suddenly, the sand gave way. The Humvee's left front wheel sank, and the entire frame groaned, tilting sideways. As the Humvee's front end dipped, sand funneled out from underneath in all directions. I slid half a step down the slope, catching myself on the wheel arch to keep from falling. Hoffman, who had been lying down, rolled over and tried to scramble up, but the sand beneath him was soft. He kicked twice but couldn't find his footing. Then the thing erupted from directly below. Sand exploded outward like water, followed by a wave of scorching, acidic air that stung my eyes instantly. Its body rose from the sand, steam hissing from the seams in its shell. Its entire color had changed, from the earlier gray-blue to a heated, rust-red hue, like iron fresh from a furnace. All the holes on its body were gaping open, wider than before, each cavity lined with a white membrane that vibrated so rapidly it blurred into a pale haze. Then it made that sound. The muscle beneath my chest, my diaphragm, suddenly convulsed, wrenching my whole body into a bow. Sour stomach acid surged up my throat, mixed with the bitter taste of what I'd just drunk. My legs went limp as if the tendons had been yanked out. My knees buckled, and I dropped onto the sand. The lenses of my gas mask fogged over. My own saliva trickled from the corner of my mouth, soaking my chin. Tilting my head, I saw everyone else was down too. Marquez was on all fours, body heaving with dry retches, vomit dripping from the edge of his mask. The platoon leader was kneeling on one knee, the other leg unable to hold him, using his rifle but as a crutch. Hoffman had it worst. He'd been lying prone, and as the sand gave way, he'd started sliding down, his lower body already sinking into a pit. The Humvee was tilting sharply to the left front, its frame emitting a long, tearing screech of metal. Asterisk screech, groan asterisk, then a spring snapped with a bang, and a wheel flew off, bouncing twice on the sand before rolling away. The vehicle slammed down on its side. Hoffman didn't have time to crawl out. Everything from his waist down was pinned beneath the chassis. He didn't scream. His eyes just went wide all at once, mouth hanging open. He pushed against the sand with both hands, nails digging in, his whole body straining upward, but he couldn't budge. The sand on the wheel side kept sinking, and with each dip, the frame pressed down another inch. Hoffman's mouth opened wider, a hissing gasp forced from his throat. The thing climbed up from the edge of the pit, his four bony legs stabbed into the sand, each step steady. It walked across the overturned Humvee's undercarriage, the bony limbs clanging against the metal, leaving dents in the hull with every step. When it reached the roof, it stopped, all the holes on its torso facing Hoffman. Hoffman was still pushing, his face turning blue-purple. It ignored Hoffman. One leg lifted and slammed down toward the M2 machine gun. The bony limb struck the receiver with a clang. The feed cover burst open and spun away into the distance. The barrel bent, crumpled in the middle, twisted at an angle. The leg rose again and smashed down on the gun mount. The mount tore free from its welded base, and the whole weapon tilted sideways. Someone threw a grenade. I heard the pin pull free, a faint ping, then the grenade rolled beneath its body. When it exploded, the blast threw up a wall of sand that rattled against my mask like hail. The thing swayed slightly, the viscous fluid on its surface vaporizing into white steam, but it didn't even turn its head. Not a mark was left on its carapace. Marquez struggled up, raising his rifle and firing again. Shot after shot aimed at the seams in its shell. Where the bullet struck, the thing's flesh would emit a puff of hot vapor. Then fresh viscous fluid would immediately well up and seal the wound. It shook its body, and the embedded bullets were squeezed back out. It jumped down from the roof. Landing on the sand on all fours, the ground sank beneath it. It began moving slowly toward us. Its pace wasn't fast, picking its targets one by one. All its hooks extended, bony legs piercing the sand with a hiss. It stopped about 10 meters away, the holes on its body opening and closing as it faced each of us in turn. That white membrane was vibrating again, humming, and my gut twisted in response. Marquez loaded his last magazine, rifle but pressed to his shoulder, aiming at a seam. Hilton shouted something from behind, his voice too broken to make out words. The platoon leader tried to push himself up but couldn't, one leg still weak. The thing kept advancing. Where its feet touched, the sand blackened and smoked in thin wisps. Through the night vision goggles, its whole body glowed orange-yellow with heat, the holes opening and closing, exhaling hot vapor that bloomed into white blossoms in the lens. I lay on the ground, hand groping through the sand until I found my rifle, fingers hooking the trigger guard, dragging it toward me. In my sights, it was veering toward Marquez. Marquez stood motionless, rifle but against his shoulder, waiting for it to close in. It was less than 5 meters from Marquez now. All its hooks were spread, the bony sickles gleaming faintly in the night vision. The largest hole on its torso was aimed directly at Marquez's face, the white membrane inside vibrating so fast it was nearly invisible. I pulled the trigger. The round struck its carapace with a clang, and viscous fluid immediately seeped out. Marquez fired too. Both our rifles were hitting the same spot, the seam on its side. Bullets struck in rapid succession, each impact making the carapace vent hot vapor. Paused. All the holes suddenly snapped shut. Then it charged towards Marquez at a much faster speed than before. Its 4 legs kicked up sand with each step, sending it flying far into the distance. The bone scythe sliced through the air in an arc. Marquez rolled to the side, but he was too slow. The scythe grazed the ballistic plate on his back, shattering a piece of it. The force sent him tumbling sideways, and his gun flew from his hand. The creature skidded to a halt, turned, and fixed its gaze back on Marquez. Its cavity opened again. I pushed myself up with my gun, my legs still trembling. The platoon leader was shouting behind me, though I can't remember what he said now. I just watched as that sticky fluid began seeping from the creature's shell seams again, sealing the bullets that had been fired into it earlier. They dropped one by one, clinking as they hit the sand. Hilton lost it. He charged out of cover in a frenzy, roaring as he held down the trigger, emptying the entire magazine at the monster. The muzzle jumped violently. After the first shot hit, the uncontrolled trajectory sent the rest of the bullets whizzing just over my head. One struck the door frame of the Humvee, ricocheted off the side panel of the ammunition truck with a loud clang. The platoon leader, lying flat on the ground, yelled, "Hilton, cease fire, cease fire." Hilton couldn't hear him. Even after the magazine was empty, he kept pulling the trigger, his finger twitching against the empty trigger guard. The bolt locked back. He looked down at his gun, stunned for a second, then reached for a fresh magazine, fumbling twice before he could pull it out. Carter lunged from the side, tackling him around the waist and dragging him down. Hilton landed on his back, legs still kicking, gun waving wildly across his chest. Carter pinned his wrist, pressing the gun into the sand, and shouted over his shoulder at the platoon leader, "He's empty! Magazine's empty!" Hilton went still. He just lay there on his back, arms spread, mouth agape, gas mask askew, breathing heavily. His gun lay discarded in the sand, the bolt caked with grit. I huddled behind the overturned rear of the Humvee. The creature's footsteps echoed on the roof above. When it stepped onto the vehicle, the entire frame sank a notch. The metal groaned and bent inward. The door I'd been leaning against suddenly buckled inward, trapping my right hand. My arm above the elbow was wedged between the seat and the door frame, the pressure slowly creeping upward until it reached my shoulder socket. Asterisk crack star. The sound came from my own bones and joints. A dull thud, then my right arm went numb from shoulder to fingertips. As the numbness faded, pain surged in. A deep, swelling, wrenching pain, as if someone had driven an iron rod into my shoulder socket and was slowly prying it apart. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. The skin inside my mouth tore, and the taste of iron spread across my tongue. The creature crouched on the roof, its four legs tucked beneath it, all the cavities on its torso aimed downward toward Hoffman. Hoffman was still pinned under the vehicle. His upper body could move, and he pushed against the sand with both hands, his face turning purple, veins bulging on his neck. He didn't call for help. He just gritted his teeth, elbows bent, pushing upward while the chassis pressed down on his hips, unmoving. He just crouched there, watching him. The cavities opened and closed, exhaling hot air that stirred the sand, pelting Hoffman's face. It wasn't in a hurry. The bone scythes extended and retracted beside its legs, their hooked tips gleaming in the night vision goggles. I tilted my head, peering out through the shattered glass, watching how it moved, waiting for it to strike. Then I saw it clearly, the motion. The carapace on either side of its torso would slide outward just before it emitted that vibration. Two plates, like sliding doors, shifted apart to reveal two layers of white membrane underneath. The membrane was thin, so thin it was translucent. Something glowed inside, a blue-green light, fine as veins, tracing paths within the membrane. As the light began to flicker, the membrane started to vibrate. And as it vibrated, that low-frequency pulse that could knock a person flat was unleashed. Carapace slides open, membrane glows, membrane vibrates, low-frequency pulse releases, a cycle as precise as mechanical breathing. I watched it 3 times. It pulsed once at Hoffman, and his elbows instantly gave way, dropping him flat. Then the carapace closed, only to slide open again moments later, repeating the process. Each interval was nearly identical, the rhythm of the shell opening and closing as steady as my own breathing. Between the carapace sliding open and the resonance, there was a deadly window of less than 2 seconds. I clenched the tactical knife I'd pulled from my leg between my teeth, biting down hard on the blade. The pain was intense, and the metal edge ground against my teeth, sending a sour ache through my gums. My dislocated right arm hung limply at my side, each slight movement sending a dull throb from my shoulder socket. I fixed my gaze on that fleeting window. On the roof, the creature was still watching Hoffman. Hoffman could no longer hold himself up. His arms lay limp on the ground, head bowed, gasping for air. I lay prone on the ground, propping myself up with my left hand as I inched backward bit by bit. I couldn't stand up. My right arm dragged limply across the sand, my shoulder throbbing with every slight movement. Using my knees and left elbow for support, I shifted back a little at a time, pausing after each movement to watch the creature's reaction. His hollow eyes remained fixed on Hoffman. After 7 or 8 shuffles, I reached the overturned Humvee. Then I began crawling toward Marquez. Marquez lay on his side in the sand, his back plate shattered, but he was still conscious, eyes open, breathing shallow and rapid. He saw me approaching and fumbled with his left hand, reaching for his rifle stock, trying to drag it closer. I pressed down on his wrist. With my left hand, I drew in the sand. First, a circle, the outline of its torso. Then, on either side of the circle, I sketched squares sliding outward, the carapace opening. Below the squares, I drew another circle with dots inside, the membrane and the glowing things. I wrote the number 2, then pointed to my watch. Marquez studied the drawing in the sand. He looked up at me, his face pale. I drew another set of squares, 4 in a row. Behind them, I sketched a line with an arrow pointing toward the creature's flank. Between the squares and the creature, I drew an explosion symbol. We had 4 claymore mines at the rear of the vehicle. If we could lure it to face the mines sideways and detonate them the moment its carapace slid open, that 2-second window. I pointed at myself, then toward the claymore's position. Marquez shook his head, firmly. I didn't argue. With my left hand, I took the knife from my mouth and sheathed it. Then I reached over, pressed my hand against the detonator box beside him, and planted my boot heel firmly on top of it. I looked him in the eye. The creature shuddered again on the roof of the vehicle. My stomach clenched, bile rising in my throat. Marquez met my gaze. His lips parted, then closed. He nodded. He rolled over and signaled to Carter. Carter was still pinning down Hilton, who had stopped struggling and lay gasping on the ground. Carter released him and Crouch ran over. The platoon leader was still shouting into the radio, but only static came through. Marquez dragged out the claymores. 4 of them, each the size of a dinner plate, gray-green with raised lettering on the front. He pried open the fuse covers with his bayonet, twisting his fingers inside. Carter helped him move the claymores to the left side of the overturned Humvee, facing the direction the creature might approach. Marquez buried the bases in sand, packed them down, and adjusted the angles so the fan-shaped blast pattern would hit the creature squarely in the side. I backed away, retreating to a spot about 30 meters from the claymores, a dry riverbed embankment, waist-high enough to provide cover. My right arm dragged a trail in the sand. The pain had dulled into a heavy numbness, spreading from my shoulder to the back of my skull, my scalp pulsing. Once in position, I turned around, making sure I was visible to the creature. With my left hand, I tore off my gas mask. I yanked the tube free, and unfiltered air rushed into my lungs, hot, reeking of ammonia. I gasped loudly, letting the sound carry. The creature's hollow eyes swiveled toward me. Stop toying with Hoffman. Its torso rotated on the vehicle roof, its 4 legs shifting direction. The bone stumps clanged against the metal roof a few times before settling. Those hollow eyes locked onto me. The bone sickles on all 16 legs spread wide. It leaped down from the roof. 4 legs hit the sand, sinking in, the impact vibrating up through the ground. Marquez lay behind the claymore detonator, finger hovering over the button. Carter aimed his rifle, scope fixed on the creature's flank. I turned and staggered toward the planned location, my left foot dragging, my right arm a dead weight swinging at my side. Every step wrenched a dull ache from my shoulder socket. Behind me, the creature's footsteps began to follow, thud, 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 growing closer. I rounded the embankment and stopped, turning to face it. It halted 7 meters away, no longer advancing, positioned sideways, 4 legs braced. Its torso faced me, the carapace on both sides beginning to slide open. The white light in those hollow eyes flickered. The membrane glowed, pulsing with a blue-green network of veins. I stared at the membrane, mustering all my strength to shout to Marquez. Now! As the word left my lips, Marquez pressed the detonator. The claymore mines exploded. All 4 detonated simultaneously, spraying 700 steel pellets in a fan-shaped blast. Through the night vision goggles, they appeared as a dense web of white streaks, all striking the creature's side. Distance, less than 3 meters. The steel pellets penetrated the membrane that had been exposed when its carapace slid open. At the very moment that thin, shimmering blue-green membrane began to bulge outward and vibrate, hundreds of pellets simultaneously pierced through. The membrane shattered instantly, tearing open an irregular gash in the center with curled edges, and the glowing substance inside immediately spilled out. The liquid sprayed out clear but turned milky upon contact with the air, then yellow, before finally congealing into clumps of gelatinous matter. The high pressure inside its body expelled both the gelatinous substance and the steel pellets back outward. I lay flat on the ground, hearing the pellets strike the sand, the Humvee frame, and the earthen ridge beside me, pattering down like a rain of iron. A few ricocheted and hit the ballistic plate on my back, producing 2 sharp clangs that jolted me forward. The creature emitted a sound. Unlike the previous low-frequency noises, this was a shriek like a steam pipe bursting. Its entire upper body tilted to the right, its 4 legs unable to support the weight. The 2 legs on the right buckled simultaneously, their bony spikes scraping 2 deep furrows in the sand as its body tilted and crashed sideways onto the ground. Steam began jetting from the fissures in its carapace. Blistering white vapor shot out, kicking up sand grains where it struck. A milky, viscous fluid started seeping from the edges of the fissure, flowing increasingly down the carapace. But it wasn't dead. It braced itself with its 2 left legs, while the right legs scrambled frantically in the sand, their bony sides churning up clouds of grit. It managed to right its torso again, all its orifices gaping open, but unevenly. Without the membrane, the openings were now just dark, wet cavities dripping thick fluid uncontrollably. Charged at me, all 4 legs drove into the ground, spraying sand backward, moving even faster than before. Though its body was tilted, its trajectory skewed, the momentum of its charge was undiminished. I rolled to the left of the ridge, and one of its legs swept past the back of my head. The bony scythe struck the ridge, shearing off a chunk of the waist-high hard soil that flew back and hit my mask. It overshot, carried forward a dozen meters by its own momentum. Its legs scrambled to break, plowing 4 deep furrows in the sand before it finally stopped. Turned, swayed, and charged again. I hadn't yet gotten to my feet. Pushing up with my left foot, I was only halfway up when it reached me. One of its legs struck my left shin. The bony spike hit squarely in the middle of the tibia. The sound traveled up through my own bones. Crack star. Dry, crisp, like snapping a dead branch. The pain didn't come immediately. First, a numbness, then a second later, agony exploded from my shin all the way up to my lower back. My leg went limp, the knee buckling, and I pitched forward. It skidded to a halt on the sand and turned. The dark, wet cavities of its orifices faced me, steam still jetting from the carapace fissure. It raised the same leg again, bony scythe spread wide, ready to strike once more. Carter fired. The report of the M110 was sharper than the rifle fire from before, ***, and the bullet entered the gaping wound where its carapace had burst open. Previously protected by the resonant membrane, now with the membrane gone, the bullet struck directly into the blue-green glowing organ within. Its entire torso shuddered, the raised leg freezing mid-air, suspended. It began to tremble. All its legs shook simultaneously, bony scythes clacking together, unable to retract or extend. Carter fired again. Same gap, deeper this time. After the bullet struck, there was a moment of stillness. Then a flash of blue-green light burst from within the wound, flaring once before fading. It started spinning in circles, its legs moving uncoordinatedly. Left side forward, right side back, pivoting in place and grinding a circular track into the sand with its bony spikes. The steam jetting from the carapace fissure increased in volume, the sound growing shriller. Third shot. Carter's third bullet entered through the same gap, striking the largest glowing mass deep within. A fist-sized cluster of tissue located at the very center of its torso. As the bullet pierced it, the light flared intensely, shining through the carapace, illuminating the entire torso from within in a blue-green glow. Then the light shattered into fragments, beams pouring out from both the gap and the fissures, casting green-tinged shafts onto the sand. All 4 of its legs gave out at once. The bony spikes slid out from under it, and its entire torso crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact. The weight dug a shallow crater into the sand, the force raising a dust cloud of sand grains. The carapace began to crack. Fractures spread outward from the edges of the gap. Crack, 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 each sound accompanying a new fissure. The milky, viscous fluid welled up from within the cracks, faster and faster, until it flowed freely, soaking the still intact portions of the carapace. It lay on the ground, its 4 legs splayed out, bone sides buried in the sand, motionless. Its torso continued to convulse, wave after wave of spasms running from front to back like an electric current. A sound came from inside its shell, a gurgling, bubbling noise, like a pot of water boiling over a fire, bubbles rising and bursting one after another. The holes in its body began to foam, white froth expanding and popping, smearing across its own carapace. Steam rose from the cracks and holes in the shell, forming a white mist above its body. I lay on the ground, my left leg dragging straight behind me, the lower half twisted unnaturally. The fabric around my shin bulged outward. I watched the thing convulse. It went on for a long time. Carter kept his rifle aimed, the sights fixed on it. He didn't fire again. Marquez ran over from the Claymore detonator, clutching a bayonet, crouched beside me, and cut open the pant leg of my left leg. There was a depression in the middle of my shin. The skin wasn't broken, but the area beneath was swollen and starting to darken. "Not a full break," Marquez said. He pulled a splint from the med kit, secured it around my calf, and wrapped it tightly with bandages. With each wrap, I clenched my jaw, the taste of iron filling my mouth as I bit down on the knife's back again. The platoon leader's radio finally connected, airstrike canceled, target neutralized, requesting medical evacuation. This time, the radio worked, and the response came. Helicopters were on the way. The thing continued to convulse. The bubbles from the holes grew smaller, the steam diminished, and the boiling sound inside its torso slowly turned into a gurgle, then a final pop and stopped. The cracks in the carapace no longer spread. The milky, viscous fluid seeped across the sand, slowly congealing, a film forming on the surface. The wet patch on the sand expanded, forming a dark circle under night vision, encircling the creature's limp body. The sand was littered with debris, shell casings, deformed bullets, grenade fragments, and the steel pellets from the claymore. Some pellets were half buried in the sand, others coated in the creature's viscous fluid, now encased like amber beads. Carter lowered his rifle and walked over to Hoffman. The platoon leader was already lifting the vehicle, using a jack under the Humvee's chassis, the hydraulic rod creaking as it rose. The chassis lifted slightly, revealing Hoffman's lower body. His pants were imprinted with deep marks, but his legs could still move. The platoon leader dragged him out by the shoulders, and as soon as he was free, Hoffman started cursing. The platoon leader pulled him onto flat ground, and the medic rushed over, cutting open his pants to examine him. I lay on the ground as Marquez finished wrapping the last bandage around my leg, tightening the splint. He lifted my right arm, felt my shoulder, and said, "Your shoulder needs attention too." I told him to leave it. When he tried to pull at it, I slapped his hand away with my left and repeated, "Leave it." He glanced at me and didn't push further. The wet patch on the sand continued to expand. The shell casings trapped inside glinted faintly under night vision. Wisps of heat rose from the cracks in its carapace, dissipating high above. The smell of ammonia still hung in the air, now mixed with a new odor sour, like something burning. When I was loaded onto the helicopter, my left leg was stiff and straight on the stretcher, secured with a splint. Marquez had slung my right arm across my chest with a bandage. My shoulder still felt heavy and swollen, as if stuffed with damp cotton. A throbbing ache pulsed from my lymph nodes under the armpit, the soreness stretching all the way to the base of my neck. The cabin reeked of disinfectant and sweat. My comrades shouted to secure the stretchers. Hoffman lay nearby, still cursing, his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper, repeating the same phrases. The medic was cutting open his pant leg, revealing a large, dark purple bruise on his leg, but his toes could still move. I tilted my head to look out the window. The creature's body still lay sprawled on the sand. The cracks in its carapace had stopped spreading, its torso no longer convulsed, but a few final gurgles came from within. Bodily fluids seeped along the sand's grooves, sinking into the ground, forming shimmering concentric circles. The outermost ring had already solidified, reflecting a faint white glow under the moonlight. Scattered around were hardened amber-like blobs of congealed mucus, shell casings, deformed bullets, steel pellets, all encased in transparent, hardened shells. The ground team was carrying thermite charges toward the wreckage. As orange-yellow flames erupted, the carapace began to melt, a column of black smoke rising straight up. Then I saw lights in the sky. High above, a bright dot was falling. Then, countless dots tore through the night sky. The base's voice came over the radio, calm and detached. Multiple targets re-entering. Repeat, multiple targets re-entering. The helicopter suddenly jerked upward, veering sharply away from the trajectories of the falling objects. The seat straps dug into my chest, and the stretcher slid to one side. I closed my eyes. A dull ache in my left shin pulses upward in waves. Deep within the bone, that low-frequency drumming, rising from the earth, still persists. Thump, thump, as if embedded in my skeleton, it hasn't left yet.